Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be swapping my rear axle from a Dana 35 to a Dana 44. And if you need to do the front, I've made a previous video on that, so please go check that out and it'll give you a hand. Just real quick, a couple reasons why this is a good swap is the Dana 44 is a stronger axle in general and has stronger shafts in it, but a big upgrade is that the fact on a Dana 35, if you break an axle shaft, it is retained on there with little C-clips that hold your whole axle and tire on. So if you break a shaft, your wheel will literally just fall off. If you break a shaft on a Dana 44, your wheel is bolted on and you can then still limp it out. You can disconnect your rear drive shaft and you can drive out and with just the front. So that's a bonus. It also has a selectable locker in it. Not that you can't put a locker in a 35, it's just not very recommended to do that. And this Dana 44 I'm putting in already has a selectable locker. And then finally, this will give me disc brakes in the rear, which is, it's not something I would upgrade by itself from drum brakes to disc brakes, but I'm happy to have them. They're just a lot easier to work with, less springs, you know. The first thing you guys are going to want to do is to get the Jeep up on jack stands and pull off your tires. That way you have access to everything and you can get the axle out when you get it all disconnected. So with that done, I'm going to start by removing my rear drive shaft just to get that out of the way. All right, this will be pretty easy to get out. It's just 4 bolts on this end, and then you can loosen this clamp up here, and then you can just slide the drive shaft right out. Okay, so we're under the Jeep right now. This is for your parking brake. This is where the cable goes to the lever for the actual brake, and then this is where the cables go to each wheel. So when you pull this one and tighten it, it pulls both of those. There's a bolt right on the back here that you loosen and tighten to put pressure on those to keep everything in place. So if I loosen that, then I can pull these down and pop them out of those holes. And then there's a clip here that you can clip or unclip and then slide it through to release these cables. Here's a good idea. If you're going to try and remove the parking brake, undo the parking brake. I've been down there struggling with that for a few minutes now, and I was just sitting there and I was like, oh, come on. I have the parking brake on, so it's pulled nice and tight. So that should help. Well, that kind of sucked getting those clips off. That took a lot longer than I wanted to, and on a nice rusty Jeep like this, it always just dumps tons of dirt and rust into your eyes, so I love it. Here's a look at my new axle. This has the clips and bracket on it already with the brake cables. This is what those clips look like, and there's, I think, 3 or 4 sides where these little clips pop out, so you have to depress them. You can kind of get a 13mm box end wrench over it, but mine were too rusty, it didn't really help. So I ended up just using a pair of channel locks on this side, kind of pulling and keeping constant back pressure against it while just kind of poking and twisting these with a screwdriver. So now I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my sway bar links on both sides. So I got both of these sway bar links disconnected now, got those bolts out, and now I think I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the upper control arm from the frame side, not the axle side. I'm just going to leave it on there. Also, I don't know how well you guys can see it, but the other upper control arm, it's going to be a little bit more of a pain because the exhaust goes right there. There you go. That's the bolt. There's the exhaust. Okay, so both of those came out pretty easy. I just used the impact with a 15mm socket on the end, and this extension got me over the exhaust, and they came out pretty easy. So my next step is going to be removing these shocks, and then that should give me enough room to start lowering the axle down without anything really holding it up except for the lower control arms. So I got the driver's side shock off all right, but I'm on the passenger side now, and let me show you what issue I've run into. I have a bar pin eliminator on here because when I got this Jeep it was bone stock, and when I first did my lift, both bolts up here broke on both sides, so I decided I never wanted to have to deal with those bolts again because they were a monster to drill out. and I put these bar pin eliminators in because it mounts up there, and then it has a bolt that goes through this way and eliminates the bar pin. So it was a really good design. It made a lot of sense, but I have since added this Savvy skid plate for my fuel tank, and it apparently has raised it up enough to where I can't get this bolt out. So I can't get the shock off from the top. So it's not a big deal right now because I've disconnected it from the axle, but I'm gonna have to lower my gas tank some just to get that bolt out and put the new shock on. So I don't love that design anymore. Might change it in the future, but I'm not quite sure. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it for tonight, but tomorrow when I come back out here, I can lower this down, and all that's holding the axle on now is the lower control arms, and I still have to remove the rear track bar and the brake line. But as you can see right here, that's where the rear track bar bolt is. So if I lower the axle down, I think I can get the impact on it and get that out a lot quicker than doing it with a ratchet. And then it will be easier to reach the brake line up here too. So that's the plan. Tomorrow I'll come back, drop it down, and then I can get to everything a little easier and finish removing it. Hey guys, next day now. So let's get back to work on the axle. I'm gonna start by removing the track bar, and let me show you also one other little thing that I kind of messed up that I didn't notice at the time. So this is my mistake right here. As you can see, this little rubber hanger got ripped. This was actually pretty new when I put that on maybe 6-7 months ago. So let me show you why that happened. I lowered the axle down yesterday because I thought the lower control arms were gonna hold it, and I wanted it to clear my gas tank so I could get very easily to the track bar bolt with my impact and not have to do it with a wrench, or a ratchet I mean. And basically what happened was lowering that pulled down on the track bar, and the track bar is hitting right there on the exhaust, so it's putting all that weight of that axle and pulling down on this one poor little hanger right here, and probably that one too, but this one really got the brunt of it. It did give me enough clearance to get to the bolt though, and I went ahead and supported the axle with the jack. That way when I undo that, it doesn't just drop. I don't think it will, but that was just a precaution. And to get this bolt out, it's a T55 Torx bit, and I'm using some extensions so I can fit my impact in here without hitting the skid plate. Okay. Well, this side's the devil, so I'm going to take it off on the other side. I've got the track bar unbolted from that side, and I also went ahead and disconnected this brake line where it connects up there. I've never messed with them before. I'll show you on the new axle. But I had this brake line replaced with a braided stainless steel one. That way it wasn't the rubber, because as the rubber gets old and under pressure, it can expand. But with the stainless steel ones, they don't expand, so you get more braking power. So I had that replaced on mine, but I didn't do it. I think it looks like it's attached to the block, so I think the block actually has to come off. So I've never messed with these before, but I plan on keeping that line, so I just lowered it to disconnect the axle, and then I'm still going to take that block and line off and reuse them because I had put all brand new brake lines on this. So I think it's time to go ahead and lower the axle and see if it comes down with nothing hanging up on it. So now that I've got more clearance on that axle and got it nice and lowered, I think I'm going to go ahead and try and heat up the back of that flag nut that's holding the track bar on and see if I can go ahead and get that track bar off. This is infuriating. Okay, so I'm just gonna move on to removing the lower control arm bolts and getting ready to drop the axle, and then I'll deal with that track bar once I have a little better room to work with it. So the nuts are off the lower control arms. The only thing left holding it on are the bolts in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the bolts out and get the axle off. Holy hell, it's free. Victory. Always remember, kids, fire is your friend. I feel like that's earned me a break, maybe a nap. I don't know. The axle's off. Pretty happy about that. Track bar was keep this PG, was not fun to get off, but it's off. There's still a few annoying things I have to work with, like lowering my gas tank to get that shock off. That just makes me mad thinking about it. Things shouldn't be this stupid, but they are. They are. That's the Jeep life, I guess. Yeah, so I suppose that's my next step. I just touched my leg to that nice hot bracket there. That'll be a fun reminder of what I've been through today. Yeah, here it is. All naked. Hey guys, just wanted to jump in for a second before we get back to work and remind you that if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you find yourself watching a lot of these videos, please think about subscribing. And that being said, if you like the video, please drop a like and give me some comments. That really helps the video and the channel out. So, thanks. Okay, so real quick, I'm gonna go ahead and do my best to get this shock off. I'm gonna have to lower my gas tank. Hopefully I won't have to drop it all the way. I'm not happy about this, but I'm not going to film this because it's not going to be a normal part of an install for any of you guys. This is just something I did to myself. So I'm going to pull that off and then I'll get back with you. Well, I got that shock off. It wasn't too bad. I just loosened pretty much all the bolts holding the tank up, and I was able to get just enough clearance to get it out. I went ahead and stuck the new one on there just to be safe. That way I don't have to mess with it afterwards. I spent a little while fiddling with my axles, trying to get the brake line off the old axle, which I did. This is one of my extended brake lines. And then the new one, I could not get it off. I think these are probably the original lines, and they just didn't want to bust free. No matter how much PB blaster or fire I used, and they were just kind of stripping. I'm sure I could get them off, but I wouldn't want to reuse them after I did. So I think I'm just going to order new rear brake lines and then swap out to this later after I put the axle on. But for right now, I'm just going to leave the brakes alone. Then the other thing I had to do real quick was to put my upper control arms on. He had the lower control arms already, so I had ordered the uppers. And then to do that, I also had to drill out the holes up to a 1/2 inch. And I had to do it for the upper mounts too. So I spent a little while getting all that drilled and fitted in. And now I rolled the axle under, and I guess I'm ready to start connecting control arms. There was a ton of maintenance I could do, should do while this is off, but I just don't have the will or the spirit to do it right now. I've just been working on this for too long. I need a break, so I need to make some progress and then just kind of be done with it for a little while and drive it. There's a lot of rust and stuff up here, and it needs kind of sanded and painted, but yeah, I'm not into it right now. So I'm gonna spend probably another hour trying to bolt this up, and we'll see how far I get tonight. Okay, after some bashing and a little bit of crying on my part, I've got all 4 control arms bolted up. They're not tightened down yet, but I do have the nuts on the end of the bolts. I think I'm going to take a break. I might call it for tonight, haven't decided. I have to work swing shift for the next 2 weeks, so I got to stay up late, so I might sneak back out here later if I get bored. We'll see. But the next step is going to be putting on the track bar, and that's going to be a pain to line up thanks to my exhaust. And then doing the sway bar. Okay, it's been a couple of days. I worked 3rd shift the last 2 days, so I haven't messed with the Jeep at all. I don't remember exactly where we left off, but I'm going to do the track bar now, and it's probably going to take me a minute and a little rubber mallet and some fiddling around to get it in there, but I'll put you guys on a hyperlapse and I'll get it going. That was actually a nightmare. That might have been one of the hardest things I had to do yet. It was so stupid. This exhaust, I absolutely hate it, and I think there's a very good chance I might go to a custom exhaust shop and see if they can make me something that's not the devil. I don't know if there's really anywhere else to run it, but I don't know. It's worth a shot maybe in the future, because that was a absolute nightmare. This didn't want to really fit in here anymore. I don't know if that bushing got a little smashed, but it was just tight. I was swinging the heavy hammer a lot. Smashed my finger once. That made me not so happy. Yeah, so I did that down here. I'm going to wait to do it up there. I'm going to try and jack it in and get it up there. I realize it's going to be too short, which I knew anyway because I'm putting a bigger lift on. But I went at one point to try and loosen this nut and make it just a little bit longer while I was here, and I couldn't get the thing back out, and then I didn't have a wrench that's big enough for that nut, and I tried to pipe wrench a little bit, but I didn't want to ruin it, so it just became a battle, and I finally got it, but I lost the will to live. I also went ahead and tightened the control arm bolts that I hadn't tightened yet, so I got those all snugged up, and now I'm going to jack it up so I can get the sway bar link back on. If any of you guys have a custom exhaust or anything that clears the track bar better and doesn't get in the way of anything, let me know, because something I might look into. One other thing I might do maybe before the sway bar link is start to put the springs in here. Also, you love that alignment? Sorry I didn't film me putting this in, but I was just kind of testing to see how much I'd have to compress the spring, and I was able to just put it in there with my hands, so that's nice. The other side might be a little more difficult, but I don't think so. I think I can still get it in there with just my hands, maybe a pry bar. was simple enough, spring on. Rear springs are always way easier than the front ones. So next I'm going to jack the whole axle up and then try and line up this side of the track bar. Alright, I got that lined up. It's pretty much a pain because it's not adjusted to the correct length, so it's pretty hard to get the bolts in there. It's kind of pulling the axle one side. I know I could have done like a mock adjustment for it, but like I said, I'm literally bolting this together and I'm going to limp it to a garage to do a full alignment, so I'm just not messing with it. Next thing to do is to reconnect the sway bar. So I have to stick a bolt through the sway bar and the sway bar link and reconnect them on both sides. That's right here. The sway bar is reconnected now, and I also stuck the vent tube back on the axle housing while I was over there. So now it's time to move on to reconnecting the shocks. This shock I've already got connected to my bar pin eliminator, so I'm going to connect the other one to the bar pin eliminator, and then I'm going to reconnect both of them to the axle. So now I'm going to reattach this other shock to the axle. I'm going to stick the bolt through facing the threads away from the tire. That way, you know, there's no pointy bit sticking at the back of my tire. So I like to depress the shock, and I kind of use my leg to help force it. Get your bolt ready. Catch it on the way down. Force it through. Dab a little anti-seize on there. Okay guys, so now that the shocks are on, there's only two things left to do for me. I have to replace the boots on my exhaust hangers because those broke, and then I have to reattach the emergency brake cables. So I'll roll under the Jeep and show you what that looks like. So real fast guys, here's a little tip for you. If you replace your control arms with adjustable control arms, you're going to lose the mounting location for your brake cable. This little guy used to mount on the old non-adjustable control arm. So what I'm going to do to give this somewhere to mount is I took the bolt out of the top of the sway bar bushing here, and I'm going to drill out this rear hole so the bolt can fit through, and then I'm just going to mount it right here. I'm going to go in between the sway bar and the upper control arm, because when those move, I mean, you would have to have like a ton of droop for this to get near that cable. And that angle also keeps a nice little bend that keeps it away from the coil. So I think it'll work out just great, and I'll show you here in a second what it looks like. So here's how the cable loops out, misses the spring, goes in between, is mounted through that bracket with that bolt, and I think it'll be fine. There's plenty of play, so this can push it a little bit out of the way. So I think that'll work great. I'm gonna go ahead and do that to the other side real fast. So the passenger side bracket's a little different. It had this little bolt stuck in there. So I stuck it right here and tapped this side with a hammer, and it's popping out. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish popping that out and then drill the hole. And here is what the passenger side looks like done. Got a nice loop, clearing everything, plenty of flex in there. I think that'll be just fine. All right, so now that you've got those cables secured, go ahead and bring one around. And if you can see here, this clip is what slides through here and holds it in place. And then this end is what will go in here. And then this bolt is how you adjust your parking brake. Tightening it will put more pressure on the cables and will allow you to get more brake. So just push it through there and it'll click in. And then do the other side. All right. So now take this piece and get your cables in. Which actually will probably be easier to do that side first. So take the bracket off, stick these through. There we go. And now reattach the front cable. Alright, so everything's reattached now. The only thing to do is to tighten this up to pull everything tight to get it all into adjustment. You don't want to get it too tight because that will then be pulling your brake. So just checking everything's tight there, so I'm ready to move on. Okay, so unless I mess something up, we're ready to put the tires back on. So here it is with the axles swapped. I've got the new 3.5 inch metal cloak lift on there as well, and the new shocks, and it's looking pretty good. It's definitely a lot bigger than it was. One thing I forgot to do at the start of the project was to actually measure from the tire to the fender to see how much extra clearance I gained with these shocks, but not a big deal. I mean, it's obviously taller because, well, it can't fit out anymore. Yeah, it's pretty strange because when I first got this thing, it was very low to the ground. It was bone stock, and now the rocker is like up to my hip. So it's definitely grown a lot since I got it. But it's looking great. I'm excited to get everything hooked up and actually get it off road. I want to try everything out now. All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to start wrapping up this video. The rear axle is totally done. I got the tires on, everything's hooked up. I don't think I missed anything, hopefully. And in the next video, I'm gonna be swapping my transfer case from a 231 transfer case to the Rubicon 241 transfer case. And I'll be putting on a new transfer case skid plate with that. I'll also be adding the Savvy shifter cable to that transfer case. And then once that's on, I'll be ordering a new drive shaft, and then most of the large projects are done. I think that'll just leave me with putting on the armor and fenders and stuff, so that'll be a nice milestone to achieve. No more huge mechanical things I have to do to it. So yeah, thanks for following along. If you liked the video, please remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next one.